Oh my goodness. Well, hello, 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 and welcome to Intercultural That who
Right.
knows? Welcome to that show. Welcome to Deanna, who's going to be talking to Valerie. Valerie, I'm gonna I'm gonna welcome us to the show. So welcome to Intercultural Spark, that show about the spark inside you that drives you to spark change in the world or your corner of the universe with mission driven businesses and life projects. I'm your host, Deanna Schaas, and I am delighted to welcome you here today, whether you join us live or if you're joining after the fact. So, our guest today is Valerie Leonard. She is, I'm really big. I believe micro entrepreneurs are going to save the world this year. These are people that are building their lives like within their corner of the world. They're just surging ahead, not asking for anything from anybody. And oftentimes, as we'll find with Valerie, is it's a combination of all kinds of things that all comes together to build a whole, including her company that she founded, which is Nonprofit Utopia. She shared that she's scared half the time, so we're excited to find out how she continues to do it. So, welcome to the show. Welcome to Intercultural Spark, and welcome to Valerie Leonard. So Valerie, thank you for joining us from the Witness Protection Program.
I got my thinking man pose on.
Exactly. I think what we find as business owners well, actually, yeah, as business owners, you go with the flow. You go with the flow, and what that means is Valerie, even with technical problems with the camera, Valerie's brain goes with her wherever she goes, right?
It does. It does.
So, which means she still has her brilliance to share with you, which you'll be equally impressed at how Valerie has built her entire life. So, speaking of which, I did want to like dive in with what is your business model? Like you have courses, you teach at University of Illinois, you consult. Like what's the vision that all these things kind of come up to?
Yeah, the vision is to make sure that the folks coming up after us don't make the same mistakes that I made coming up. And I made
Mhm.
an awful lot of mistakes. So that I can share a lot of really good wisdom, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So bringing the courses, bringing the community, bringing the consulting, and all of that good stuff together, hopefully, makes for more well-rounded experiences.
Sure. You know, what's interesting actually, hi Danielle. It's interesting because one thing you've talked about is the whole idea of relationships and how you just maintain relationships across the lifespan. And so Danielle, I feel like we met, I feel like we met at an art fair. She was doing these really cool art programs. Then her mom was a photographer when I was at JCFS. So Danielle, thanks for popping by. But I think Valerie, it's very timely too, because it ties into the theme that you've talked about, which is relationships. So it's all together, but how do you find the relationships you've built stay with you across all these different parts of your life?
Yeah, I think the folks that I make relationships with, one, they live in the community, they're neighbors. I'm from North Lawndale, and we have significant need, and just living, drinking, eating, and breathing
Mhm.
in North Lawndale sometimes can be a challenge for a number of reasons on many fronts. So I stay in contact with my neighbors. I also stay in contact with funders who want to help. I stay in contact with elected officials, and just basically making sure that I'm connecting
Mhm.
people with resources. And
Mhm.
even the funders are looking for resources in people who live in the community who can help execute their vision, from a
Mhm.
team perspective.
You know, it's interesting because when, as business owners, we're making decisions all the time. And one of those decisions is where are you going to operate your business? Half the time now it's remotely. But
Mhm.
talk about it sounds like as part of your business model, the fact that you live in a community where you're trying to do capacity building, like that's
Mhm.
almost part of your brand. How do you see that?
Yeah, like I said, I live, eat, and drink and breathe capacity building. I live, eat, and drink and breathe education and bringing back resources to the community. And for me, it just feels like second nature. I was raised in a family that valued education. Both my parents were raised in the South and they were poor, but the
Mhm.
culture was one where, once you were able to better yourself, so to speak, you reach back and get the next generation. So they instill that
Mhm.
in my siblings and I, and that's just something that I just carry with me in everything that I do.
Sure. You know what I love about that too? Again, I know I keep drawing back to this whole idea of micro entrepreneurs, but I just
Mhm.
think that we're like the superpower. And what you're talking about is because when you get to big businesses talk about how do we align our values with what we put into the world, right?
Right,
And actually, nowadays, younger employees, when I've seen people entering the workforce, like they don't want to work for a company that doesn't have their values aligned. But I
right.
don't know if people like you're doing, like you literally are aligning your values with your work.
Yeah, yeah. And when I was younger, I tried to align the company's values with my own. And I soon learned that that didn't work. Going
Mhm.
to environments, trying to change them, trying to change cities, trying to change large corporations. And it occurred to me, if I'm going to thrive, I'm going to need to create that ideal community, that ideal environment that I wish that I had that could nurture
Oh,
me
interesting. Because you
along.
worked in big companies, right? What companies? You worked in some pretty big
Yeah,
corporations
yeah,
before. Was it in
yeah,
finance, or what did you do before
yeah,
you opened your
yeah.
own?
I was in
Mhm.
finance. I worked for Prudential. I worked for what
That's
is
some big
now
names.
Liberty Mutual. I worked
Mhm,
for the city of New York, working with Wall Street firms, so some really, really large entities and trying to
mhm.
change the culture in these large entities that have been around for a couple hundred years in some cases. That doesn't always work, right?
Mhm,
Especially not in the 90s, in the 80s
mhm.
when greed was good, right? It was a whole total
Oh my
different.
god, business leaders were allowed to just behave poorly,
Yeah,
terribly. So, one other question, then Brianna's got a couple questions I'll put up, which is, oh my god, which is so funny, which I which I just totally forgot. So I'm gonna go to Brianna's question. But what I was gonna say was this fact of because you and I know each other from years of like
yeah.
through working in not for profit. So I know what the term capacity building is, but people who
Mhm.
aren't in the not profit world might not understand how you're using that term. So what is capacity building?
Yeah, and it's good that she's asking because even if she knows what it is, it means different things to different people. So
Hmm.
when I use it for our purposes today, I'm speaking of ways that you can work with organizations, their leadership, and putting, I guess, what we call infrastructure in place, which are those systems that we need to have what behind the scenes, so to speak, to make all of our glorified programs work. So we're looking at things like fundraising, finance. We're looking at board development
Hmm.
and those kinds of things that are not glamorous, but if you don't have them in place, you're not going to be able to make the programmatic impact that you need.
Hmm.
So,
Right. So whether it's staffing or funding, it's actually the capacity, the ability to do more. And what
right.
that means for a different organization depends. And you're going to laugh. Wait, I just remembered what I wanted to say, which was, which was um, you were talking about how hard you found it to make change on the corporate level.
Mhm.
However, what you do now with leadership development and individual coaching, that's how you make change. So by changing, you have the ability to influence an individual who's within an organization to then make that change. Have you seen that happen? What's an example where you've seen that happen in your work?
Yeah, I have worked with organizations that are very grassroots, and in
Mhm,
many instances, they were not necessarily aware of all of this stuff that we call capacity building.
mhm,
The tendency is when you see a need, you go out there and fill it. Folks in nonprofit are very entrepreneurial as well. But what I've been able to do is help them do things like translate their vision into foundation ease. so to speak. So helping them to
Wait, say that again because wait, translate vision into foundation
foundation
ease.
ease.
Tell me what you mean by
I
that.
Yeah, when I say foundation ease, I'm talking about a whole different language. Many of our foundations are run by people with PhDs.
Here we go.
They
What did you say?
what did you say? Yeah, foundation ease. It's a totally different
Mhm.
language that funders use. I mean, even
Oh my
municipalities.
god, so you've got someone who's got, like, a vision, who's like, "I'm gonna save the world, I'm gonna do this," but then they get all excited to present to the foundation's like, "Yeah, we're not gonna fund it." Like, it
Right.
is it so translating it into a way oh, that is interesting. You have to translate your vision into what a funder might fund. But also, Valerie, you're talking about grassroots, and
Mhm,
a lot of people hear grassroots, and I think of no money or,
mhm.
people like 1 or 2 people, shouting on a street corner. You're not talking about that. You've worked with some pretty big corporations. So when you say grassroots, what do you mean?
I mean, people with no money who are on
Oh.
I'm
That's funny.
sorry.
Okay. No,
No, but
please.
but grassroots really can be at, different levels of
Mhm,
grassroots. In some instances, you can be a
mhm.
$5 million organization and still
Okay.
consider grassroots, not having what we done become a going concern or an
Wow.
institution,
Mhm,
for not having these systems in place, meaning that if the leader, the executive director were to walk away
mhm.
from this $5 million organization, if they don't have the systems in place, they're going to fold, right? The same as you would
It's
here.
amazing that people can grow that big before they get the systems in place. Oh,
Mhm.
Brianna was laughing at the, grassroots. Also, just another shout out to Danielle. Danielle, my child is 20 now, okay? So she's right. I think Luca was 3 and going through one of the big speaking of, like, grassroots things, it was one of the big art fairs. He was so funny. He was going around asking the artists what their intention was with the artwork they were creating. Um,
I think, well, you're an artist, right? Is that true? I know you're a writer, but are you also an artist?
a writer. I sing really poorly and I compensate by singing louder. So
But you're
so
creative.
yes, exactly. I like to think that I am. Valerie, but okay, when this capacity though in this community building type thing in terms of how money works, the other thing you told me a story which I found fascinating. So even with the way funding works, sometimes you have these big corporations who are like, we're gonna go in and save the neighborhoods. We're gonna go into a neighbor in need and we're
Yeah,
gonna plop down this huge
yeah.
thing and the neighborhood's gonna be better.
Hmm.
How does that work?
Oh, I tell you what, if you were to read stories and articles about North Lawndale in 1963,
Mhm.
and if you were to read those, stories about what's happening in North Lawndale today, you would swear that you're reading the same story,
Ah,
right?
yeah,
And what
it's hard.
happens is with all of this parachuting, we do get the financial resources, right? But if you're not sharing money in such a way that you're developing the people that live there, all you're doing is really throwing good money after bad, and
Mhm,
then people wonder, well, how come we don't see any change?
mhm,
We're giving these folks millions of
mhm.
dollars, but you got to look at the programs and the intent.
I think it's the programs, but it's also something that we're seeing in the field of diversity, equity, inclusion, where it can't be the boss saying, all right, all my employees, I'm going to train you on how to be inclusive. Like, unless the organization
Right.
also has that change of heart, like the way that the organization, when they come into the community, has to be part of the community. I actually made a mistake. This was years ago, so I'm gonna take youth as the mistake. I
Okay.
was the public relations account supervisor for the McDonald's owner operators in Eastern New England and had connections in the city. So
Okay.
McDonald's wanted to sponsor a tree lighting. Crisscross, that hip hop group was they were gonna sing.
Yes, yes, yes.
It was really cool, but I called my contact at the city and I was like, "Hey, McDonald's, wants to do this." And somehow, like I'm still defending myself 30 years later. Somehow that got communicated into we want to move the tree to in front of the McDonald's restaurant.
Oh,
So basically, it was awful because of course instead of us coming in saying, "Hey, we're new to the community, we want to support and get into the groove of what's there,"
mhm.
it looked like um McDonald's was going in and saying like, now we're here, we're just going to change everything and build it around us.
Right. And that happens time and time again. It's a
Hmm.
really delicate dance because,
Hmm.
when you think about it, if communities like North Lawndale could do it, by ourselves, if we could do it ourselves, we would have done it, right?
Hmm.
You
Sure.
need that outside help,
Hmm.
but there's a way to do it, such that it doesn't feel patronizing. And then that people really walk the walk. There's some organizations that really do like being in control, and they have no qualms letting some of the folks know that they're in control, and
Hmm.
that's not a really uh, good way to operate.
I think people aren't going to get along with that as much anymore either, because more and more people are speaking with their buying power. So, hi, Cecilia. Thanks for being here. She is asking, is it more common than not for organizations to skip the basics of business? Oh, you know what? Actually, this is a good question because Rihanna's
Mhm,
asking the same thing
mhm,
about infrastructure. It takes vision, mission, strategy, etc.
mhm.
Cecilia, you may be talking about big businesses. I'm going to actually bring it back down to you as a business owner, which was kind of how oops, oh, look at me. Okay. Wait, that's like me making myself full screen. There's Brianna. What would you say is the first step in creating an ideal community environment for your company or business? So maybe look at it from both levels
Yeah,
for big businesses and yourself.
right. And then too, I didn't get the second lady's name, not Brianna, but the
Oh,
lady
Cecilia.
Cecilia.
Yeah.
Yeah, to her point,
Hmm.
that brings up a good point that nonprofits are businesses too. We tend to look at
Yes.
nonprofits
Yeah.
as charities
Hmm.
and, let's give them some money and not hold them accountable. They're doing good work, blah, blah, blah. But with the younger generation of entrepreneurs who are now investing in nonprofits,
Hmm.
that's going away. Nonprofits have
Yeah.
to be accountable. They have to have some sort of social return that can be measured. And yes, it
Hmm.
does need to be aligned. You need to have a vision and then have processes that support those visions and make sure that you can sustain yourself over the long term. But in terms of Brianna's question about how do you create the environment for yourself? I find that I have to do a lot of self work because,
Hmm.
as you know, in leadership, you know, the the organization can only go as far as we, the leaders, go. And if I'm hurting, and I have
Hmm.
been hurt a lot in my life and in
Hmm.
my business, if I'm hurting, then there's only so far I can go. If I have
Sure.
limitations, I need to shore those up and then focus
Hmm.
on my strengths as well. So I create
Are
whatever
there
environment we
specific
have.
things that you do? Actually, for anyone who's tuning in, I just want you to know that Valerie Leonard is actually, now I'm looking at your dark screen. She's actually an artificial intelligent entity. So,
But that doesn't mean non-intelligent. I'm not a vegetable.
um, Valerie, what so funny. What do you do to help yourself? I know I've got all kinds of things that I need to do. It's like we have to get out of our own ways. Now, with the good work that you're doing in the world, I sometimes like to frame it as an ethical issue. Like you've got
Yeah,
so much smarts and your impact is affecting so many people in such a good way. So, not to put the pressure on, but I feel like you're obligated to get out of your way and do your
I
work.
I
So,
am.
okay, so how do you do that?
Um, by reflecting on mistakes that I've made, not that
Mhm.
I'm dwelling on them, but I'm always looking at different ways I can do my work better. I started Nonprofit Utopia in 2018, and I think I tweaked my model
Mhm.
3 or 4 times, looking at, what's working for me, what's not working for me, trying to get input from the community. So it's not just Valerie's vision, it's a collective vision, in our
Mhm.
community, as we do our strategic plan. And so that's one way of getting out of my way. Another way of getting out of my way, I'm someone I can be laser focused and I can work while other people are sleeping.
Mhm.
And that's not really healthy, right? Um,
Right. Right. Sure, sure. Yeah.
yeah. I'm trying, I've been saying for 30 years now, I'm going to get balance. I need balance because if
Mhm.
I'm not healthy, the workplace isn't. healthy, that's
Mhm.
mentally as well as
Which
physically.
the way that you phrase that is interesting. And Cecilia, it goes back to what you were talking about. Like, do you have to have business systems and things like that as you're starting your business? There is something to be said for just doing. Like at some point, like, inertia doesn't help anything. So there is something said for I'm going to figure
Right.
out what I can package and sell and serve people. But even just the fact that you said, I've got this entity. And when you, me, other micro entrepreneurs, when we're the front face of our entity, that ability to say, okay, there's me and there's the entity, I think
Mhm.
that's a healthy balance, because then you can take the pressure off yourself and say, well, I'm going to build this other thing over here.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I
I
like
can't believe this. We haven't even gotten to the topic, the name of our show. We haven't even gotten to it yet. And we're like down to 5 minutes.
oh, goodness.
So I got to do it. By the way, Do It Scared. Brianna helped me know is actually, I don't know how someone does this. So this is a message to anyone who has a cool name. You should trademark your name, Nonprofit Utopia. Somebody trademarked the phrase. It is a trademark phrase, Do It Scared. So we had
Oh,
to change.
wow.
Yeah. So I had to change it.
So
Wait,
we
so then it was Scared, Just Do It. And I'm like, oh, darn, Just Do It's taken. So,
You're right, right,
so now it's just Scared, Do It. Because you talked about who was like that billionaire, the guy who got the $1 billion prize that you got on your podcast. And you're like, oh, I just called him.
right.
Talk about that, because cold calls can be awful.
Yeah,
Like,
they can be awful, and before we go there, I just
mhm,
wanted to say too, in terms of balance, I'm also a very
yeah.
spiritual person, and that
Mhm.
keeps me focused. But um, there's a certain passion that I have about sharing knowledge, and if I see someone
Mm.
out there, I don't care if they did win $100 million or what,
Mhm.
if they're a billionaire, I'm going to call them and see if there's some way that we can connect. Not so much for myself because when I think of myself, I probably would never do it. But when I
Mhm.
think about the larger mission of sharing knowledge that this person
Oh.
has
God, I
with
love how you've done
others,
this. So
right,
it's not you asking them to be on your podcast. It's you saying this person has knowledge that people really need to know. So I'm just going
right,
to ask them to do that.
right.
That's fascinating way to look at
Yeah,
it.
and when I started my podcast, the goal was to get people who people look up to in the nonprofit arena and be able to talk to them, right? People can call in and talk to these people directly, and the guests tend to come on because they know that they can't touch all of these people individually. They don't have time to
Mhm.
mentor, but coming on
Got it.
the
But they can
show,
do it there.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
The other thing that's really good about that, Valerie, and that goes into not related to our topic today, but sometimes people are afraid to talk about their business because you're like, oh, I'm always selling. I'm selling something.
right,
And it's actually you're not selling. So you asking them, it's not like, can you please, please, please come on my show? It's more, here's an audience that you might want to work with, and here's a way to access them. So
hmm.
it's like helping them. So we are at Marion says hello. I'm
Hey,
going to remove
Marion,
this from
how are
here.
you? Thank you for joining us.
Oh, so we are actually now at the part of the show, believe it, that we're ready for the I'm going to show you what it is. It is our dun, 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 flash exercise. All right. So you were talking about, which is so important, about like spirituality or how we get balance in our lives. So
Right.
as business owners, especially if we're the ones kind of driving stuff, you've got to have other things that provide balance for you. For
Yes.
me, it's fitness and exercise, and I'm actually a certified fitness instructor.
Well,
So
awesome.
there's a little known genre of fitness called interpretive aerobics. It's the deeper meaning of exercise.
Uh-oh.
So I am going to do an exercise. I'm going to make myself full screen first. Oh, actually, you're just going to make sounds and tell us you're doing it because we won't be able to see you. I'm going to
Oh, good. I get you.
Oh, come on. That's not fair. All right. I'm going to show you the exercise, and then I'm going to invite both you and everyone who's watching live to do it with me. You can do this at your chair as well. This is a great way to get cardio. It's called Tabata. It's 20 seconds as hard as you can work, and then you take a 10-second break.
Ah,
The theory behind it is that it gets your heartbeat really high and then recovery. So it's really good for your heart. And then as you repeat those, it actually helps you exercise. So basically 20 seconds. I like to do like a, what is it? Jennifer Beals, like Jennifer Beals
Oh,
with
yeah,
her, it's a maniac. Okay. So 20 seconds, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2,
woo,
1. And
take
then you
off.
just stop for 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you do it again. Okay. So that's your Tabata.
Oh, I
If
like
you're in
that.
your chair, you can actually get amazing cardio in your chair by you can actually in your chair just pump your legs. So Valerie makes sound effects so we know you're doing it. There we go. Yes. 20 seconds as hard as you can go, and then you break. All right. Do you have any idea why I picked this exercise specifically for this show and you?
Because you know that I'm always at my desk.
And now
I'm
you've got
trying
a
to say it
fitness thing to
nicely.
do. Oh,
Yes. Thank you. And you know
um,
what? I was thinking too. I said, you know what? I'm so glad that she asked me to do this because I'm really not in my comfort zone. You know, I always, yeah, this is not my comfort zone at all.
wait. Here's a secret. If you're trying to push yourself out of your comfort zone, go on someone's show and then pretend like your camera doesn't work so that you get like both. Valerie, you're busted. All right, wait, let me
Yeah.
also though tell you why, which is great. This is an example then of
Mhm.
the scared, just do it anyway.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that the 20 seconds is like when you're scared, you're like all frantic, like, and then you stop for 10 seconds, you're like, it's out of my system. Let me do what I gotta do.
Yeah.
So that's the deeper meaning
Yeah. Beautiful. It's
of our
beautiful.
exercise.
I
Yeah.
started to call you at 3 this morning and say, thank you. I don't think you would have appreciated that.
That's so
So
funny. I was probably working on my book deadline, my writing deadline for someone. Oh, good. Cecilia's doing the
oh,
movement as well, or she did it with you.
awesome.
Um,
Awesome.
Thank you so much for being on the show. And just so everyone knows, so it's nonprofitutopia.com. I want to tell you that Valerie is an amazing model of how to build a business. Because again, you're teaching, you have a book, you've got the podcast, you do individual coaching, you also have a membership. So nonprofit leaders, I wish I had your book when I was at the League of Chicago Theaters, like it's your first 100 days and as an executive director. So it's fascinating to me. And that's the power and the most amazing thing of being an entrepreneur of you know that you can have an impact in the area where you are and then doing all these things like you said to bring that obligation to the world. So thank you for being you and for doing all that you do. And thanks
Thank
for being
you.
on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you, everyone who joined live and after the fact. We're grateful to you, and we will see you next week on Intercultural Spark.